Welcome to QA Q&A. I am your host Shweta, and in today's episode, we'll have an insightful discussion on observability with our guest, Parveen Khan. Parveen is a quality assurance advocate, AWS Community Builder, and an international speaker. Currently, she is residing in London and works as a senior QA consultant at ThoughtWorks. Convinced that delivering high quality products is a shared responsibility, a significant part of her career has been effectively focusing on collaborating with others, transforming processes, and applying practices and tools at scale. She's a sought after presenter at international events and conferences, a proud woman in tech, and a mother of two. Welcome to the show, Parveen.
Hi, Shweta. Thank you so much for an awesome introduction.
I'm looking forward to observability, which is not spoken much about in the testing community. And I know you have been practicing it for quite some time now. With that, I'll move on to the first question. What is the difference between observability and monitoring in context of data?
Yeah, I know. Whenever we talk about observability, we do have to bring the topic of monitoring, right? So it's more like monitoring is more of whatever things we know. So the issues that we know that we want to monitor, maybe it could be something like it's about monitoring the known things, known state of the system. So it could be for example, you might have a lot of services or a lot of APIs, or you want to monitor whenever there's some kind of 500s, or if there's any kind of spike, or if there are a lot of 400s. So you know what you want to monitor. So it's about you knowing the state of the services and then monitoring for that and being kind of a reactive after seeing the dashboard. So it's more of having monitoring is more of known state of a services and APIs, I can say. And more when it comes to observability, it's more of having inbuilt something on your services so that you can find out unknown unknowns and not just the known knowns. So it's whether be it monolith or whether be it microservices, distributed system. So there are a lot of different moving parts, or you can say that you cannot know an entire thing, the whole systems to know how it would behave in certain way, right? You might not know that the different states of the system. So having observability helps you find out those unknowns. It's kind of leads you the trailing path to figure that out. So that's how I see the difference between what monitoring is and what observability is.
Well, quite intriguing in that case, observability, trying to understand the unknown uncertainties. So, can you explain the three pillars of observability, which are metrics, traces, and logs?
Yeah, I know. Whenever we talk about this observability, again, we talk about these three pillars, and we think that these are the three pillars that are needed for observability. But I feel like it's much more. But yeah, so I know. When you think, so it's about thinking about what do you need to build that observability within your system, within your product, right? So that way you kind of come across okay, I need to have some kind of logs. I need so that I understand with each request what's happening, so that whenever I read this particular message, do I understand what's happening? And it doesn't have to be for example, not every someone is looking at the production issue, for example, and that engineer or a developer has not worked on that particular feature or a story, for example. And then when they are trying to debug what's happening and how easily are they able to understand the logs that you have implemented. It doesn't have to be the person who has implemented it, but it is to be everyone, whoever is accessing. So how easy is it for them to understand the flow when they're looking at the logs? How easy are they able to read that? How easy are they going to grasp the information? So that's where I see the importance of having the logs and how you implement them and how you have the process in your, as part of your ways of working within your team to implement as part of the feature. That's where the logs are helpful. And again, when we talk about logs, it's not about just having some random message saying that, yeah, some request has worked. It's about thinking about how meaningful in a message that you add, and what, apart from the message, what else are you adding to that particular log. So making it more structured log, like, which service is it coming from, what time, or what is the status of it, or even more meaningful, which user ID is it coming from. So it's like making, it depends on your teams, I guess, like making as meaningful as possible so that it helps you in, like, finding out information or debugging much more easier. So that's about the logs. And when you get back onto metrics is like, more of like, you want to like calculate the number, like for example, how many users have logged into my system, or it may be like how many users have. So for example, you might have released a very great feature, and you might want to see how many users have accessed that particular feature. So you need to know that all you're interested is like, you want that number. It's not about like how much time are they spending, or what is the easiest journey. So it's not about that. So if you're interested in that number, so that's what metrics is. It's about how are you capturing that metrics. It could be like, using any kind of like dashboard, or it could be any kind of tool that you use. So it's more of a business metric. It could be any, like, again, if you think about metrics, it could be your business wants to know, like, we have released this feature, how many people have used, as I said, an example. And it could be like, a metric could be like, you have like your DB database maybe, or a service, maybe you want to see a metric of like, what is the capacity, like, what is the memory of it. So it could be anything, like, different kind of metrics that you can collect. So basically, what I can say is like, it's a number that you want to keep monitoring, keep observing. So that's what a metric is, from what I see, what I have learned from. And coming back to traces, I guess it's more of like, okay, now you have logs, okay, and when you are debugging, you can see the logs, but you need to have the, so when you want to see, so for example, in microservices or distributed systems, right, you might have some 4 or 5 or tens of services, like executing the same particular, like, kind of, you can say, a feature or anything, right? So how would you know which service was broken, or which service had an error, or like where exactly the problem is? So I think that's where the traces come into the picture, where it helps you understand the whole story of the entire transaction, I can say, like, the entire request, I can say. Whenever, like, for example, a user is like, for example, clicking on adding something to the basket or checking out, what are the things that happen in the behind the scene, or what are the services that work behind the scene. So it's about knowing the whole story. Like, I can say, like, maybe as testers, we see a lot, like, when we are testing, we see the network log and we see the waterfall kind of a view. So that's exactly what the traces are as well, in terms of observability.
So, since you have been practicing observability, can you tell the audience how can testers contribute to or leverage observability further?
Yeah, I think since I've started learning about this, again, I'm still learning a lot. It's when you work with different teams with a different context, it becomes even more different challenge to work on. So I guess the thing that I always try as a tester is like, so when I started understanding about observability, right, so for me, first thing was like, how is it going to help me, or how can I help my team to implement observability, or how can I add value when team are thinking about observability. So I think that's where my thought process started from, when I tried getting into this space. So that's where I understood, like, we kind of, like, as a we kind of do a lot of exploratory testing. We explore to know the product, right? So
Right.
I feel like so far I've been using it. It helps you understand a lot about how different services behind the scene are working together and what other things that you need to know when you have this ability to access these tools, right? Like when you have access to these logs, when you can access this, it helps you so much to understand about the system that you might have never known, right? And it is kind of that's where, right? When you're testing, when you're thinking about quality, it's about knowing the entire and knowing the things about the product and trying to figure out what are the risks of the product, right? So that's where I feel like, and I feel like helps us as a testers to think about how things are going on, to learn about the product and see how the product is like, working, and how all the services are talking to each other. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is like, it's not about consuming only, but also I can add value as a tester as well. You can add value as a tester as well. So for example, when you're working with a developer where they are implementing a feature, so mostly don't just look at just like functional side of thing and testing side of thing, but also look at like how ask these questions to the developer, like how confident, like how would you know if something has broken with this feature once you release this to prod, right? And what are the logs that we have in place, or how can I understand if something has broken? So it's about, being kind of a coach, quality advocate, and asking those questions and help the developers to think about that on the feature level. And then when you're testing it, you when you're exploring it, you can leverage that in place and see when things are broken, are you able to understand properly where things are broken? And it's like whenever you find kind of a bug, right? For example, it's like just don't go to the developer saying that, hey, look, I found a bug. Can you just see what it is? But it helps you in getting more details about like, look, I think there is an issue. And I think I tried to look at the logs and I feel things are okay in terms of this service because I get a proper response from here. But I think it is breaking after this call from this service, as an example. So I'm giving this information showing the developer that I was not interested in just finding a bug and being very happy about it, but more of like, I'm trying to help you by finding the information that you have added, and I'm showing you that how I have leveraged that and how useful it is just for me as well, and not just for the developers, and going back and giving them the information. So it's few of the things that and observability is one of the very important cross-functional requirement, which is one we call like non-functional requirement, which very commonly said, right? So when we think about cross-functional requirement, like not just thinking about performance or accessibility, but also testability, like right. So observability as well is part of this cross-functional requirement, and you have to talk about how you bake this into feature development. So yeah, these are the few things.
I think personally, I could take away some three important takeaways. One is uncovering the risk areas under the hood, something which is not
Yeah.
visible, right? Second
Yeah.
is you actually contribute to faster time to market because you are part of the debugging process, right? And third is improved testability. Wonderful,
Yeah.
Parveen. Thank you. And what have been some of the challenges, common challenges in achieving complete observability of a system, and how can they be addressed?
Yeah, I think one thing I can say is like observability, or I think anything as part of the teams we are working on, it is a very continuous process, right? Um, and I guess when you work on different teams and different product, different type of domain, I think you kind of face different challenges when you want to have like implement, forget about like having matured observability, but starting steps of observability. So the challenges starts actually from there itself. And I know, like with DevOps, we think, right, like we can have some automated tools in place and we can say DevOps. We cannot say that, right? It's more of a mindset, right? So it goes exactly the same with observability. That's how I feel like, that's how I think, because observability is not about just getting, any tools, like for example, having some shiny expensive or like normal tool as well in place and saying that yeah, we have this tool in place, so we have observability in place. No, you can't say that. So it's more about your mindset. How are you trying to thinking about observability from the start, and how are you making use of that observability during the debugging of whenever there are the production issues, and trying to take that as a feedback. Because it's not about, like for example, you say that yeah, we have observability, but then when you have a production issue, how easy is it for people to figure out the root cause? It's not about fixing the issue straight away, but it's about how easy is it for you to figure out the information so that you find out the root cause. And then see, it's about learning from that feedback loop. And then it's what do you do after learnings from that? Do you implement the process as part of the process to see, yes, we missed some of the logs, maybe we need to improve a bit of logs, maybe we need to improve some kind of like include extra information, like maybe debug logs or something. So it's about having that mindset thinking and then improving it. So I think for doing this, it's a bit of a challenge, right? Like how can you, and especially as a tester, because it's not you who are implementing observability, right? Like just you can just go and build some POC and show that okay, look, this is how it is useful. So it's not that. So as a QA, as a tester, I think it's more of like trying to influence the team, and it's about trying to help them understand why I'm talking this and how it will help the team. So it takes a little time to get there. But I think so far I've worked on multiple teams and tried this approach on different domains again, because with different domains it's different things, and again with different tools. So only thing I've tried always is trying to help people understand what is observability, why, and how it helps, and how we can try as a team. And it's not about having a nice to have or a tech debt kind of a thing which we can do or implement once we finish releasing the features and let us look at it later. Not having that mindset, but having a mindset of like it is a cross functional requirement, so can we at least have a bare minimum thing and check whenever we are building a feature, whenever we are testing a feature, and whenever we are releasing it. So it's about that. And I think the challenges is like more of like convincing the teams to invest their time in this, and getting them to think that this is not a nice to have, but it is kind of a must have. And yeah, it's like, and I think I've also gone into a space where when you work on a one single team, I think it's like you can try and figure it out. But when you're working on a imagine you're working on a cross functional teams where you are 10 or 15 teams, and the whole product is made of like all those 15 teams, for example, and you build observability on one team, doesn't help, right? It won't help the product visibility, right? So it's about those challenges as well. So it's not about the challenges as in team itself, but challenges to think about the whole product and the context that you're working on, and then think about those challenges. And I guess for me it was hard to convince people coming from a tester's point of view, but I think it was I'm so glad like people were influenced enough to so I did try to do some kind of like presentations and some kind of knowledge sharing sessions, so that without knowing, without thinking that they know observability, without having that assumption that oh, they might already know what observability is, so they should know. So not having that in my mind and going to the team and saying that hey, look, I've learned this from one of the conference, and I would love to share this and see what your thoughts are. And then using that space to influence as much as I can to say that how useful it is, and then showing them, not just sharing the information, but showing them how we could do that. Like, when I say how, it doesn't mean that how you can implement logs, how you can implement these traces, but how we can make it as part of the process, which is not a very difficult thing to do. Or, what tools we can use. It's not like we need to have everything in place to start that, it's about having the basics. We can always start with little steps. So you can imagine, right, how those challenges, people's challenges could be, but it's very rewarding at the end. Even though you'll have a lot of challenges, it is very rewarding to see people following at the end. It's not complete observability, but it's about people coming along on the journey of like, yes, let's try is one of the magic word, I think, for me. I've always used that. Let's try. If it doesn't work, let's stop it and see how people think about it. So yeah, I think all of these, and building community of practice of observability when you work on, like, 10 or 15 people. So it's hard to bring everyone on board, but as you have to start, right? Even if you have two people, that's a win. You
I
can
agree.
start, I think. Yeah. So yeah, it's about, like, yeah.
I think that's a wise piece of advice for all the folks here. And I'm sure they're going to feel more courageous knowing that Parveen also faces challenges with getting buy in from her folks at her organization, which is so common across all our organizations. Tools are easier to deal
Yeah.
with. And another
Yeah.
important advice that I liked was taking baby steps and then building your maturity over time, which is something that I personally practice as well. Wise words there, Parveen, and courageous of you. And you also spoke of how it helps with root cause analysis. And my next question would be on similar lines. How can observability help with RCA and troubleshooting in production systems?
Yeah. I think, as I've been talking a lot about visibility, building observability is all about building that visibility of your services, right? So once you have that visibility, the first thing is, like, I think of it as like, it helps you in being proactive rather than reactive. It's not about, I mean, not all the time, but at least in very common issues, right? Like, for example, you won't not all the time getting call from the users or from the customers or something like, oh, something is not working. So I think it's more of like you being very proactive, that something has gone wrong, sometimes, quite a lot of times, I guess. And I think it's knowing that from knowing the issue, because you have built that visibility within your services. It helps, as I said, it helps to not only just the developer or the engineer who has implemented the feature, but anyone on the team or anyone can pick up that incident, like,
Right.
that issue, and then try to figure out where things have gone wrong. So it kind of like helps you, right, in the time to find the root cause and forget about fixing. But yes, knowing, so it's about, like, this is one of the factor, but other factor is like knowing, like, when you have production issues. I'm not sure, like, I'm sure, like, you might have been on so many prod incident calls, where you all get into the room to understand what's going on here, and people's frustrations for hours and hours, right? And that kinds of somewhere demotivate create some kind of a demotivation as well, and it breaks your routine of your work, right? Like, what you're working on, you have to drop everything, come here, and imagine you're working on for 4 hours or 5 hours and not knowing what's causing. So it helps in eliminating that kind of stuff as well, because it's like, imagine you're on call, and within an hour, or you found what is causing it. I'm not even counting how long it took to fix, because that's nothing, like, that's something a different thing. But knowing that you found is such a joy for people, like, all the people being on that call when you're dealing with the production issues. So I think that helps in happiness of the team as well, which is one of the huge factor when you working collaboratively on the team, which I feel like it motivates you to even build even more, things within the team, right? So I think I see it from the two sides: one, like, debugging, and one, the team's happiness. So I think these are the two kind of a thing which kind of helps. And I think, again, you can take this back to your business stakeholders, right? And say that, look, because we have invested so much time, because a lot of, like, when it comes to the higher level, they don't understand the value of why we are investing so much time in these tools and building observability within the features, right? So this is where you can take this time back to your business stakeholders and show that how long did it take, or how long did it take for you to figure out the issues and fixing the issues, which is what they love to hear, I guess.
I agree. I second that. I think two things that I liked about this perspective was one, of course, finding out the problem sooner. Fixing is secondary, but it's such a huge relief that
Yeah.
you found out the problem faster. And one important thing that you mentioned was that we don't rely on a particular person, right? If observability is in
Yeah.
place, even if the person is not available, so it's like heavily solution oriented, process oriented, than being people dependent. So yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. Moving on to the next question, since we've spoken so much about it, what tools are commonly used for implementing observability?
Um, I think, yeah, there are so many tools that have came out now, right? Like there are so many. I guess depending on, like, there are so many different factors that you can consider when you're picking up those tools. I guess, like, you have New Relic, Datadog, Honeycomb is one of the one, and Splunk for having all those dashboards and all the logs in one place. And you have Kibana, you have Grafana for monitoring all these things. So it's about having that combination of different monitoring and the observability tools in place so that you can leverage both together. So I think, yeah, these maybe light steps. So these are some of the tools that comes to my mind when you ask this.
And do you have any preference?
No, I don't think so. I have any preference because I think with every tool I've used, like I've used, like for example, Kibana or Splunk, or I've used a bit of Honeycomb and New Relic, um, Dynatrace as well. So every tool, as I again, I'll try to say this, like, depending on the context you have and what things are you trying to observe and what things are you trying to resolve, I think it it kind of differs a lot. So I don't have any favorites, I guess, like, yeah, because I'm like exploring a lot of tools. I've used a lot of tools, so I didn't come across any one yet. I mean, of course, used all of them, but I just loved using Splunk as a tool for log, like having the so easily being able to create your own queries and having your own dashboards and being able to see all the logs in one place. I think that's one of the tool. The thing is, like, it depends on what you are trying to see from the tool. So for me, it's like, how easily can I use my own query and try to build my own query and save it somewhere so that I can use it at a later point to see how the data in the history and now has been referred to. So it's, for me, I think that's the main factor. So that's where I see Splunk as one of the tool that I've used heavily in the past, which I kind of liked from the user interface perspective and easiness of the use as well. But again, it's not the complete observability tool. So that's why, yeah, that is one of the tool for mostly using for logs and dashboards. So that's one of my favorite, I can say, but not a observability tool. So I'll be very
Okay.
specific.
Okay. So what Parveen says is that use tools in context. Very important.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
agree with that. And so, can you give an example of observability and how it has helped you in making informed decisions real time?
Um, yeah, I think I can say, like, for example, whenever I'm working on a feature, I pair with the developers, right? So from the start till the end, for example, if I'm pairing, so this is one of the things I felt very valuable. So they would so once they have built it, so they would come to me and they would say like, hey Parveen, look, like we have built something and we feel like it's almost there, can we just pair and do some testing and see if the logs make sense while you are exploring and I will see. So that's one of the things. So it's like, it helped me in build, like, having that dev pair kind of a contribution where it's not I'm not just pairing. So people don't see me just as a I can testing related question kind of a thing, you know what I mean? Like it's not like, so it's like tester means just testing, right? You
Yeah,
kind of have
testing
that.
means test execution. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I feel so happy when people come to me and say that, can we just see how we can improve the logs, or can you see if it's meaningful? So I think that's one of the aspect, right? So, and pairing, it's not just for, I don't just feel happy that I'm getting to pair to improve the logs, but it's more of like, I've been mostly solo tester on the teams in most of my career, right? So having that kind of a relation and having that kind of a pairing on different things, not just for testing, is such a valuable thing to feed for me, because then you can share your ideas, you can share your perspective, and you can bring even more improvements, because then you build that allyship with your members, right? So that's one of the thing. And how I've made informed decision is like, for example, if we are releasing a feature, if I'm pairing with a dev and we are releasing this feature to the to prod, right, for example, and then we are like, oh, shall we just create a little dashboard for a while just to see if you how many users are using this, because we want to know. So for example, imagine you released a feature thinking like, yeah, my job is done, but then you don't see any issues, but that might be a sign that no one is using that, or feature is working correctly. So those are two things, right? Like, so I think for me, like, yeah, mostly when I'm doing this kind of, like, we kind of have this question and then we say like, yeah, we want to see, are people getting onto this feature on this page or not? Are they clicking this thing or not? I want to see, I want to track this for a week. And see if people are using this or not, to see how valuable this feature are. It's not about week, but certain time. But um, so I think to see that and getting back to the business and saying that, hey, look, you said this feature has been so important and you made us do this because it is a high priority, but no one is using it. So what's the matter? So can you just figure? So it's about being. So this helps us in having those conversations.
Right.
So if you don't have this, you won't have these conversations because you don't have that ability, right? So it kind of goes in full circle, I guess. So from the start till the end, and getting that information back to the business stakeholders and saying this is what is happening.
I would say this is a great example of collaborating on building quality actually, and that too in, quality that matters to the business. So this is a great example. And how can this be used to measure the effectiveness of changes made to a system? I know you briefly touched upon it in one of the previous answers. And how can but this be, used to track the changes made to a system and the corresponding metrics?
Yeah, metrics. Like, I mean, for me, like, when I think of when you say like, measure of effectiveness of the things that we have implemented. So for me, it's like, okay, if we are releasing this particular feature in production right now, what are the things? It's not about looking at a number or calculating something, but what are the things that I would look for, or we as a pair, like, we would look for, is more of like, okay, once I release, are there any, has this created any more new issues because of this? Because it's not about when you release this feature, it's like just isolating yourself to this particular feature and looking at this and thinking that all other things are working perfectly fine. It's just an assumption, I guess. Like, you can't think of in that way. So I think it's about making sure making sure looking at other part of the side of the things as well. So because you have this particular thing, like because you have some observability in place, you can measure that kind of a thing. It's not, it's, I mean, I know I'm saying this, but it's not about measuring, but it's about knowing that you have released your piece of a thing, but you have not affected other parts of the system. Because I know having regression testing, having a lot of automation testing in place helps as well. But sometimes all green bills as well, you might have seen there might have been some issues, like even if we have some green
Right.
bills, right? So that's
Right.
not just one sign to say, think that yeah, everything is fine. So it is about always having that curiosity and having that thing in place to see, like, have I even broken something else? So that to me is an effectiveness, like, releasing and asking that question and seeing other things, and making use of these observability in place, and monitoring what is there, and then using that to say, yes, I have not broken anything. And I feel like, because I can see this, I can see, no, I don't see any errors in so and so place, and I see some people, I see the number going up because people are accessing this particular page since I've released this. So it's a happy number. So I think it's not about reaching 50 customers, but it's about having some number up, right? So that shows that people are using it. So it's that kind of a thing that is effectiveness, but not exactly a hitting some number or something, or no issues or something. There's no such thing as no issues. So yeah.
Yeah, you spoke of, all green bills still causing production issues. That is forcing me to think, is observability also about testing the underlying current? Okay, so right, you spoke about all green bills and you spoke of non-functional testing, and so can this technique be used to monitor the performance also of microservices in a system?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I know. So with like having these observability in place or anything, so like you are monitoring, right? So when you're monitoring, you want to see how your spike is, like for example, how your API, how your health check of an API is, or are there any spikes for 500s, or, and then when you see that, there is something gone wrong. So for example, you see a monitoring dashboard, right? You see a spike, you're like, oh my god, there are so many 500s. What do you think? Why are these 500s? So you have that, you can see that, but you only know that there's a spike. But now you can make use of observability and try to figure out where these 500s are coming from and why they are coming from, right? So it's not about just knowing there are some kind of performance issues going around. So maybe something to do with too many, or something to do with low response time of an API. So you using observability to find out why this is happening. So it's
Okay.
about knowing what is happening, but then using this to know why is it happening. So this is how it helps in improving your performance, I guess. So if you see some API, if you see it's going very, like, the response time is going very high or low sometimes, and you don't know why is it high sometimes and why is it low at sometimes. So that's where you kind of use observability to figure out what are the different things that are happening at the same time that is letting this response time very low. Then let's figure out. So I think, yeah, more from the performance side of things, I think this is what I feel like you can make use of it.
Okay, so not only does it highlight the performance issues, but it would also help you with RCA of the performance bottlenecks, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Parveen, you've spent so many years in this industry and you are looked upon by so many in the community. I am one of them. And I
Oh
came to
god.
know about you through social media because of the work that you have been doing, and, your talks, your sessions, the knowledge that you spread. What have been the crucial lessons that you have learned so far in your testing journey?
Oh yeah. Lessons learned in my testing journey, right? Like I think it's like learning never stops. So I think I keep learning how and what I need to learn and improve. I think one thing I've definitely learned throughout this is like in my previous years, like, in my very early, when I started into my testing career, I had no clue about these communities or, like, networking capabilities, or I was in my own bubble, I can say. I was on in my own bubble, knowing that this is what testing is and this is how you do and this is how you work with the team. So I was in my own
Okay.
bubble for quite a long
Okay.
time. And then I think once I came to know about one community, and then I started getting involved and learning so much how other testers are thinking about how they are working with their teams, and how are they trying, what are they trying. So it's about, like, one lesson learned for me was like, yeah, it's like, I'm not alone, like, I don't have to. So it's like, as I said, right, I was a solo tester for quite a moment of time in my career, and even sometimes, even now, I'm a solo tester on the team. So it's hard. So I used to always feel so sad about it, that, oh, I don't have any other testers to brainstorm, like, or to come up with some ideas, or to share my challenges or something. I used to feel that, but I think I don't have to feel that way. I don't feel that way anymore, because it's more of like, you have so much, like, you have communities, and now because everyone has gone virtual, it's even more opened up quite a lot of doors, I can say, because everything has gone virtual mostly, and there are so many people who, ask for help. um I think, yeah, it's like, you never know who will come back to you, who will get, because it's like, you don't have to be scared, like, or scared, or thinking like, what if they might not help. So asking with a mindset that it's okay if they can't help, because they might have their own, like, commitments or something, it's okay. But if you ask, you never know who might get back to you and help you, and in the same way, you help others as well. So I think, for me, it was the journey was like, yeah, actual journey started since I came into these communities, I think. And that was more of like, yeah, be open, learn, and contribute back to the community. So I think, yeah, I'm still trying to learn even more, like, as I go, and see how, what are the things that I can, consume, and what are the things that I can give back.
Okay, okay. So staying involved with the community is what Parveen says, folks. From a very young stage of your career, stay involved in every possible way. Don't hesitate and be courageous and pay it forward is what is most important. With paying forward, we've come to the end of this episode of QA Q&A, and I would like to thank everybody for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our discussion on observability today. We are grateful to Parveen for sharing their insights and expertise, experience with us, and we hope you were able to take away a lot more from today's episode. We appreciate your feedback and support, and if you have any questions, don't forget to comment below this video and we'll get back to each and every one. For more QA content, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. We look forward to hearing from you and bringing you more engaging content on quality and testing in the future. Until then, it's me, your host, Shweta, signing off. Bye bye.